Senior Technical Advisor to Kirk Humanitarian, and we are a US-based foundation that assists national governments with financing for product supplies and technical assistance to introduce MMS. The presentation I'm going to give in a moment is based on a collaboration among Kirk Humanitarian, the Vitamin Angel Alliance, and Pajajaran University in Indonesia. Before I move on, though, I do want to mention and remind everyone that neither Kirk Humanitarian nor the Vitamin Angel Alliance manufactures or sells the Unimap product, but both of our organizations purchase MMS and use it solely for donation to eligible partners who are actually introducing MMS. So also for those of you who are just becoming familiar with Unimap MMS, it is the United Nations International Multiple Micronutrient Antenatal Preparation. That's the Unimap part. It is a specialized formulation of multiple micronutrient supplements generally for pregnant women. It contains 15 essential micronutrients that are shown in the facts panel on the right. And for simplicity, I'm going to refer to this formulation throughout this presentation as just simply MMS. The formulation itself was developed in 1999 for the specific purpose of creating a supplement for pregnant women that could be used in clinical trials. And the clinical trials that have been completed since 1999 have generated an extensive body of evidence to show that MMS improves maternal health and also reduces adverse pregnancy outcomes as compared to iron and folic acid. The safety, the cost effectiveness, and the affordability of MMS have also been thoroughly examined and demonstrated. The evidence that has been accumulated has led to this initial global policy framework that consists of WHO's antenatal care recommendations for a positive pregnancy experience. That's on the left-hand side, and it contains a context-specific recommendation for MMS use. The middle document is UNICEF's interim country-level decision-making guidance for introducing MMS. This provides practical programming guidance that recommends introduction of MMS into antenatal care services, but informed by implementation research. And on the far right is the WHO model list of essential medicines that was updated in 2021 to include Unimap MMS. Currently, there are at least 20 countries that are introducing or exploring the introduction of MMS, consistent with this global policy framework on the screen. And we expect that over the next several years, there will be many more countries that will be joining in the opportunity to introduce MMS into their countries. I do want to underscore here that MMS is not a magic bullet, and its introduction should be leveraged to improve antenatal care services generally, but to include the interventions that are recommended by WHO, which are most of which are found in the document on the left-hand side of your screen. So, excuse me, given the evidence, the global policy, increased awareness and interest, global demand, as Martin indicated, for MMS is growing, and the projected to outpace global supply, as shown here in this figure. There are two ways, at least, to show demand. And if you look at this figure, the light gray bars show total demand by year based on live births. The dark gray or slightly bluish bars show the demand based on total pregnancies. The dark blue line at the bottom that crosses all of the bars shows actual and projected volumes of MMS supplies produced by the existing manufacturers, but assuming a realistic expansion of their manufacturing capacity over the time frame that's shown in the figure. The orange line shows exactly the same thing, but it assumes, in addition, a modest increase in the total numbers of manufacturers who are producing the MMS product. So the current progress to date, or the current progress to introduce MMS through the application of implementation science, which is in fact the recommended approach, shows that we're on a trajectory to reach about 100 million pregnant women annually in low and middle income countries by 2030. Under both of the supply scenarios that are shown in the figure here, the demand for MMS outstrips supplies starting in 2024, but it continues through 2030. And in fact, the supply gap widens as you get closer to 2030. Even under the accelerated supply scenario, which is the orange line, the volume of product produced in 2030 will support only roughly 50% of the 100 million pregnancies that are associated with the projected introduction initiatives that we can foresee at this point. So the bottom line here is that the supply gap will become evident in 2024, and without incremental action beyond what's already planned, by 2030, we'll have sufficient MMS supplies really for less than 25% of the 228 million pregnancies that actually occur right now annually in low and middle income countries. I think that there is probably agreement among all of us that this requires immediate planning and action to resume, because it's an unacceptable situation for future growth of the programs. The urgency to act is driven by a number of key realities, many of which we have discovered as we have been examining country experiences. So the first and foremost and most important reality here is the lead time to production. Manufacturing by a manufacturer producing this product for the first time requires a 3 to 5 year lead time to complete all the steps that are involved in getting to a finished product that's ready for commercial use. Secondly, is there are very few countries that have the technical and industrial capacity to produce MMS. This means that we are going to have to depend on high volume manufacturers to meet future global demand. And of course, many of those manufacturers can and are actually located in low and middle income countries. Right now, there are only 13 manufacturers globally who are able or close to being able to produce MMS for commercial use. Unfortunately, manufacturers will not start product development unless they have a contract in hand. And then finally, adding MMS to a national government's regular procurement mechanism is actually quite complicated, and it's going to be require a significant investment of time and expertise and financing to actually make happen. So, recognizing the complicated nature of product supply, Kirk Humanitarian has created this resource document that's on the left-hand side of your screen for stakeholders that are interested in securing MMS supplies. It is informed by the experiences from 8 countries. It begins to identify lessons learned and operational considerations that are important to developing a national strategy, irrespective of whether the national strategy seeks to have supplies from national, regional, and/or global suppliers. And we should be looking at this document as very much a preliminary document, but it is intended to open up a dialogue around the learnings that have occurred to date so that we can get to a consensus supply strategy. So let's look a little bit at the overarching findings that are generated and shown in the report. And as stakeholders introduce or explore the introduction of MMS, they have begun to identify real and perceived supply barriers to introduction. The key questions and issues that have been identified to date fall broadly into 3 categories. The first is availability and accessibility. And the questions that are raised here are how will governments secure availability when product manufacturing is so limited? How to access product supplies, both in the short term and the long term. How access to supplies can be synchronized with various stages of program implementation. This is particularly important because the recommended approach using implementation science is staged, and it requires different levels of product throughout each of those stages. Another broad area is affordability, and this is a question very much focused on whether MMS is affordable as perceived by the government itself, and that would be ministries of health and finance. And what should the product actually cost if it's being produced? And the third area is around the building of manufacturing capacity, and there are a number of questions that are identified here, some of which include, should the product be manufactured locally or should we import it? how to predict whether a manufacturer can actually manufacture a quality product or not and be successful at it. How long does it take to produce a product? How are we going to assure quality? And are there service delivery issues that affect the MMS product, how it is produced for the marketplace? And this last issue is actually quite important because it focuses mainly on the packaging of the product, and there is a lot of implementation research going on right now to examine that very issue. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but what it does do is it helps to bring into focus some of the supply considerations that are of interest to national, regional, and global actors. For example, the concerns that are facing or represented by national actors are things like what are the procurement options? Countries know that they can purchase this product on the international market, but if they do local manufacturing, there are a range of starting points for local manufacturing. Will the government actually adopt the UNIMAP formulation and policies that are needed to incentivize its adoption? And very importantly, is there a sound business case for manufacturing in the target country? Another area of considerations is for regional actors, and their concerns are whether manufacturers have the capacity to meet just local demand, or do they have excess capacity, and can they actually produce for export? What does that entail? How do they make that happen? Another concern is, will the government accept sole source procurement where local economies of scale dictate? And this, of course, is an issue where some countries have very limited numbers of pregnancies on an annual basis, and there may not be a sufficient amount of production needed to service more than that could be serviced by more than one company. Finally, at a global level, the concerns are, what does the manufacturing landscape look like? Who are the manufacturers in that universe of capable manufacturers? Where will investments have the most impact? How to deliver a standardized and interchangeable product, no matter who produces it and no matter who buys it? And finally, whether potential manufacturers will need some level of technology transfer. So let me finish this overall introduction by enumerating some of the urgent actions that are needed to accelerate supply that are mentioned in the report. The first is we need to gain consensus on an overall approach for positioning, building, and allocating resources to meet that demand that we've mentioned. Second is to build and implement a specific product supply strategy to expand manufacturing. There is a need to improve coordination of procurement and deployment of donated supplies that already exist to remove the inefficiencies in those processes that are currently impeding introduction. And there is also a need to identify and activate at least two strategies, first of which is to finance incremental purchases of MMS beyond that's already provided by donors. We know there's going to be a need for donated product sometime into the future, and we need to figure out ways of enhancing the financing that already exists. And secondly, there is a need to facilitate access to foreign exchange for MMS procurement that's going to be done regularly by governments. We expect and we know that governments are interested in buying this product. However, whether you are importing the product or whether you are manufacturing it locally, there is a foreign exchange element that needs to be considered and needs to be planned for now. And then finally, there is a need to acknowledge the importance of achieving a common approach to producing this product that will meet quality standards that everyone can buy into. And then we have to take steps to make that quality system actually work. So in closing, I think we need to, as stakeholders, recognize the need to understand the supply landscape, collaborate and partner to generate a consensus on supply issues because they're different from country to country. We need to develop an actionable strategy and plan to assure availability and access to supplies. And most importantly, we need to act now to implement plans to expand existing supplier capacity and to add new qualified manufacturers. For those of you who are interested in reading more about this, there's obviously the resource document itself and other documents that are on our website. You can go to that. It's listed right there on the bottom of the screen. And for those of you who have questions that may need an individualized answer, feel free to email me as needed. Thank you.